Ladies and gentlemen, it is spooky season, and I have another story from the book Hell House, another true hauntings from around the world, a book I owned as a kid. In fact, it was this exact book. It was written by Alison Rattle and Allison Vale. They did a fantastic job, but don't take my word for it. Let me read you a story. Hell on Earth. Port Arthur, Tasmania. Port Arthur, on the Tasman Peninsula, off the coast of mainland Australia, boasts some of the finest fortifications. The tallest stretch of coastal cliffs in Australia, the blistering seas, and the dark colossal forests provide an imposing backdrop for one of the 19th century's most infamous prisons. The location, the conditions, and the knowledge that inmates had scant hope of ever returning home earned the prison its nickname of Hell on Earth. For modern Australians, the name Port Arthur remains synonymous with misery, inhumanity, and death. In the 19th century, thousands of criminals, many of them guilty only of petty theft, and many of them women and children, were shipped from Britain to Australia in the dreaded punishment known as transportation. The journey itself was a harrowing 15,000 miles and could take up to 8 months. Many did not survive. In 1830, the penal settlement on the mainland began to rid itself of its worst male offenders, and a shipload arrived on the island known then as Van Diemen's Land, to be put to work on a timber station supplying the Australian government. By 1833, Port Arthur had become an established prison settlement. As soon as they were off the ship, the men were set to work, back-breaking, logging, or stone-breaking for hours, every day, made all the more dangerous by the weighty chains they wore around their ankles. Punishments for slackers were harsh, and lengthy public lashings with a cat-o'-nine-tails were commonplace. Gradually, a new style of punishment was incorporated into the prison regime. Men were subjected to months, sometimes years, of solitary confinement. Confinement meant being restricted in specially designed cells known as dark or dumb cells, which were entered via a series of doors designed to exclude all outside noise and light. The punishment and the monotonous work drove many men insane, and one man stands out above all others as its chief architect. In 1833, Charles Booth, the commandant of this settlement, vowed that he would take the vengeance of the law to the utmost limits of human endurance. And he certainly achieved his goal. Indeed, the convicts themselves felt Booth's regime went far beyond testing the boundaries of human endurance. Asked to describe the impact of the Port Arthur penal settlement, one ex-convict simply said that it broke men's spirits. Today, there is little doubt that the spirits of many hundreds of men who died there were indeed broken. Visitors to the site leave with one lasting impression, an uneasy sense of the despair that filled the prison. Paranormal activity is extensive, and it's thoroughly logged. Visitors are asked to complete an unusual occurrence form to keep a record of any experiences that occur and their precise location. Todd Darling, a regular tour guide at Port Arthur, has been struck by the similarities between all of these reports, marking that visitors to the site consistently file reports describing the same thing and places as reports filed by strangers 10 years earlier. Many of the stories describe floating orbs of light and sudden cold spots, accompanied by overwhelming feelings of hatred and anger. Hearing voices or footsteps is common. Some reports describe apparitions of officers or convicts, and more rarely, some claim to have had conversations with a convict who suddenly vanishes. Spectral activity, not apparent to the naked eye, has been captured on camera or film with alarming frequency at Port Arthur. In one case, a woman was filmed by her husband using night vision during one of the after-dark, lantern-lit ghost tours of the site. When they watched the footage the next day, it clearly showed a glowing ethereal cloud pass through her body and leave the room, closely followed by a loud bang that made all members of the party shout in terror. Her husband had seen nothing of this through his lens as he had been filming. The most sinister reports are from people who have experienced more direct spectral contact. One of the cell blocks on the site is filled with a particularly overwhelming sense of foreboding. The atmosphere is so menacing that many visitors who enter its thick, cold stone walls have the distinct feeling that they are being watched. Some are overcome with a sense of utter misery that seems to reside there, as well as the odd sensation that they are lost. In fact, a few find themselves literally lost and have to seek help to find their way out of the blocks. Some are overcome with the sense of utter misery that seems to reside there, as well as the odd sensation that they are lost. In fact, a few find themselves literally lost and have to seek help to find their way out of the block. The most disturbing incidents involve one particular cell, in which some visitors have reported suddenly finding themselves unable to move and fighting for breath, feeling their throats constrict as if gripped by spectral hands. One woman reported feeling consumed with despair that she would never be able to leave. There is a small island in the bay at Port Arthur, known as the Island of the Dead. It is a cemetery where more than 1,000 souls lay buried. Death would surely have come as a blessed release for many of them. But the question remains, just how many did find such release, and how many remain trapped to this day in their hell on earth?